Hello, my name is Margaret Ward Burnside of Tampa Bay Magazine. Do you love learning about history, hearing stories, or telling stories? Join us at the Palm Harbor Museum, the only place where our hometown history comes to life. We are located in the historic Hartley House on the northwest corner of Belcher and Curlew Roads. Join us at the museum and share your hometown Palm Harbor story with us.
Proudly sponsored by Bright House Networks.
A distinctive two-story house stands at the junction of Curlew and Belcher Roads in Pinellas County, Florida. This is the Palm Harbor Museum. It is the result of decades of work and planning by many caring residents. As these citizens observed rapid development, they concluded that the Palm Harbor region had a rich history that was in danger of being forgotten. They began collecting everything from the past that they could lay their hands on. Tools, china, and handmade furniture were gathered and stored. Journals and photographs, even an original Palm Harbor fire truck, became part of the collection. A permanent home was established when the historic Hartley House was acquired by Pinellas County. It opened to the public as a showcase for hometown history on November 7, 1998. The Hartley House was built by Thomas and Ida Hartley. It has a story to tell. Lumber for construction came from pines felled nearby and cut at the local sawmill. Concrete was hand-mixed, then poured into forms to dry, block by block on site. Construction took 3 years, from 1915 until mid-1918. It is said that the mortar is pink because the Hartley children poured mulberry juice into the mix. The house was built dog trot style, with each first floor room having a door to the open air hallway. The only air conditioning was the breezes through the house, while heat came from the kitchen stove and fireplaces. Kerosene lamps provided light. A well on the property was the source for water. There was no indoor plumbing in the original home, so of course there was an outhouse. Although citrus was king of crops, guava held an important place in local cuisine. Beneath the kitchen was a cellar where Ida Hartley stored quantities of her homemade guava jelly. With the sale of jelly and her talent as a seamstress, Ida helped bolster the family finances. A museum landmark is the magnificent jacaranda tree that shades the south entrance to the house. It carpets the ground with purple petals when it blooms. Mr. Hartley established a ladder factory, a necessity of Palm Harbor life in the citrus groves. Remnants of the foundation hint at where the building once stood. Part of the museum collection is the Cracker House, which once gave welcome shelter to families of hardworking citrus grove and ranch workers. Community volunteers maintain the Palm Harbor Museum, relying on donations, sponsors, and members for support. Here, hometown history comes to life. Let's go inside to view some of the Palm Harbor Museum's treasures.
Well, I think cultural history is really important to preserve because it gives people and future generations an idea of how those who have come before them have lived. So by keeping track of not just how people lived and made their living in a community, but also the kind of material culture that they consumed, depending on the time period. It could be newspapers, it could be books, it could be television programs. That provides a very concrete example of how people might have passed the time as they're living in the community.
Well, museums actually are the foundation of history, and it's an opportunity for those that are younger, or even those that was living in a certain period of time, to continue to remember what has happened and what's going on before them.
Mostly you visited people, you know, you just walked up to their house and they were glad to see you because you didn't have any communication. Nobody hardly had telephone and very few had electricity. So it was a different category and a different stage of life those days.
Did 1 year, the Florida Humanities Council did a year of grants already, and we saw tremendous impact on these Smithsonian grants because people want to see them. They bring their children. There was one in Dunedin, and they had a huge impact there. But the way we worked is the new Smithsonian grant.
We did research on the kitchen. We found out what it looked like back in the day, and so we did. Interior decorator, so we did all the restructure of the kitchen, and it was just a beautiful, wonderful thing. It was like, just a nice project to do, and I just fell in love with this house.
Learn what your grandparents' life was like, learn what your parents lived, where they lived and what their life was like, and the things that they had to do back then. And today we're in such a high-tech world, it's easy for them to learn history. But you wonder if they really understand what it was like without all these gadgets and gizmos that they have today. The history in our school system is quite interesting, and it's something they need to learn about too. How the schools came about, what we're doing in school today and why. And history is just a part of all of it.
Most of the people who come and visit Orlando, the mecca of entertainment in Orlando, a lot of them go either west or east to the beaches, and a majority of them want to see a small towns, want to see a small downtowns and so on, because they relate to that. And that's why historic districts, in my opinion, is really important, because it tells the people what this area used to look like 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and so on.
I have a lot of memories of Palm Harbor. It's a wonderful place. We've been involved with the Palm Harbor Chamber of Commerce for many years, and of course the museum. We're active with a lot of the museum events and the chamber events, and just try to stay active. It's really a wonderful place to live.
To have the artifacts that allow us to tell the stories of how people lived in the past, and to be able to make that connection for people who have the same common concerns today is very important. And so museums like this here in Palm Harbor that tell the community history, it's not just the history of the small community here, but it's how it relates to the larger story of American history.
It's not until time marches on that they realize how important history is. And it's the old saying, you learn from history, and history repeats itself. So if you don't keep that in mind and you don't keep your history going, you won't know where you've been and where you are today. So it's very important that people remember history is significant to what you are and where you are that day.
I met Bill Hoskins, who was a longtime resident and art teacher in the area. And I always had so much fun going into his antique shop. And I was just amazed that it had been a college town and quite a vibrant place in its history.
This is the very essence of our existence, is history. And museums such as this particular one here is so crucial and so important to our, not only Pinellas County right here, but all over the world, quite frankly. History is where we come from and really will dictate where we go, and that is our ability to remember it and understand it.
Some of the things I remember is someone was trying to wrestle cattle, and Lois and I would spend the night underneath the boot, and there was ventilation windows, and we would sleep under the boot, and then we would walkie-talkie back to Mr. Boyd what was happening and if anybody was out there looking around or whatever.
Mi favorito de todo en el museo es las chiquitas casas.
Palm Harbor Museum is a non-profit organization that receives no government support and relies solely on donations and memberships from people like you, people who care about cultural heritage and understand the benefits of preserving the past for future generations. We firmly believe in what we do and recognize the significance of our mission and the importance of history education to our residents, visitors, and children of all ages. Go to our website and learn more of how you can help preserve the past for future generations.
We'd go up to, of course, Wall Springs is a little further, but Wall Springs was a wonderful place to go. And going down to, later on in years, going down to Pop Stansel Park. We were involved in Little League in Dunedin, and so we ended up in Palm Harbor many, many times doing that.
In the 1940s, I interviewed Emer Dowd, an old barber, the first barber in Palm Harbor, and Emer said that he made the famous hair road. He lined a rutted out road with the hair of 10,000 barber patients, and it became the famous hair road and made Ripley's Believe It or Not. And he also pointed to an oak tree, ancient oak tree that the Spanish set their compasses by, the west, east, and south branches. And he had a hat cocked down, pulled down over him, and I said, "How do you know all this stuff?" And I looked, and he says, "Well, I take a few nips once in a while."
As a young boy, I would wade across Curlew Creek, and I remember walking through Palm Harbor, and that it was endless orange groves, that it was kind of mainly citrus groves you could keep walking through. And near my aunt's house, you would always see the large trucks, filled with citrus. There was so much citrus in the area. So that's probably my first really strongest memory is all of the orange groves.
One of the very significant books that we have at the library to relate to Palm Harbor history is Yesteryear I Lived in Paradise by Myrtle Betts. It paints a real picture of what it was like in the area back in the day, and gives a real idea of that to people who have moved here recently from the north.
Knowing about your background, knowing about your history gives you a much greater appreciation of your community and what the importance of your community is, and what the purpose of the community is. And everyone likes to know about, I think history, no matter in the big picture or the small picture, local, larger stage, it's just full of lots of fun factoids.
I want to impart to people how incredible it is that we have a place where we can come to relive and learn about this history that happened, but also a place where we get to continue to make history, the history that will be the future of Pinellas County. And so here we have the Palm Harbor Museum, which is our hometown pioneer museum about the history of Palm Harbor area, and we do hope that everyone will come and visit us and enjoy the history that we have to share here.
And I ended up meeting two sisters who grew up on Indian Bluff Island. Well, they were born in 1917 and 1918, and they grew up on the island. It was called Buchanan Island, and I found them and interviewed them. So that's how that book. But I'm very interested in local history, so I'm writing more of it right now.
We came to Palm Harbor and we realized we had to gas up the car and pack a lunch, because there wasn't either restaurants or stations where you could get fuel. So that was such a contrast from what we have today, of course, because we have all of that and more than Clearwater has now.
It was far enough away from everything else to feel like you were not in the hustle and bustle of everything else.
This program is so important, and that's why we need your help. So please, dig deep, do what you can to help. This is so important, because all these things that are being brought to light now will be forgotten soon, and it must be remembered, because without these memories, without these thoughts, future generations will have no idea of what happened and why this wonderful place we call Palm Harbor now is such a wonderful heaven to live in. So please, help us preserve our past and ensure our future. Thank you.
I'm just glad I'm a native of Palm Harbor and was born here about 2.5 miles from here. lived here all my life.